government is a blessing. It's a God-created institution, and it's a blessing when it stays in its lane. When it gets outside its lane, it becomes a curse because then it becomes abusive. Then it begins to take away those rights. And our founders were smart enough to say, man, we're going to spread this thing out at the federal level. We're going to spread it amongst these three branches of government. And then we're going to spread it between the federal, the state, and the local. And then even at each of those levels, we're going to spread it out even more because we don't want any one group or one person to have too much power.
Rick, it's becoming more and more popular for people to be reading the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in light of the things that are happening culturally, politically, in the news. People are concerned and getting back to original founding principles. Do you think that this is an overreaction, or is this a good idea?
It's healthy. It's really healthy. And in fact, it's, in a small way, if you go back 20 years to 9/11, we were attacked. And as a response to that, when we went through tough times, there was kind of a renewed patriotism in America. That's a good thing. Didn't last long because it wasn't an informed patriotism. I think what's happening now with all the negative of the last couple of years, now people are hungry for an informed patriotism. So now they not only are saying, I love America and I love freedom, they're actually asking, how do you do this well? How do I become a good citizen instead of just sitting on the sidelines? So I'm actually excited about it. I think there's some really good things happening in the country right now.
Rick, the Constitution has been heralded as one of the greatest documents ever produced, political documents ever produced. Now, we know that it's not on the same level as the Word of God, but these biblicists who understood God's principles gave us something pretty phenomenal. Help us understand what's so great about the Constitution.
Yeah, they were taking ideas that had been kind of sprinkled throughout history, but never combined in the way that they did in the Constitution. And when you combine the Declaration and the Constitution together, as we should, there were founders that talked about the Declaration being essentially the slab upon which the home of the Constitution was built. In other words, it's the philosophical foundation upon which then the rule book or the way we play citizenship in America, the game of citizenship, if you will. But then the Constitution itself, this separation of powers, this ability to have these checks and balances, to empower not just one person, but this multitude of people in the government and split that up and have all of those things the way that they arranged it was just absolutely brilliant. And the results speak for themselves. I mean, we're the longest living constitutional republic in history. We're the most powerful, most free, wealthiest nation in history. Very important, we're the most benevolent nation in history. So something about that secret sauce that they put into those documents worked incredibly well.
Some people would say that our founders were atheists, were agnostics, were deists. The people that actually signed the Constitution were trying to get God out of government. But how does the Declaration of Independence blow away and debunk those myths?
Yeah, if you think about our constitutional republic and how that system works, and even the Constitution itself, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that government is giving anything to the people. It's the exact opposite. The Constitution holds up this idea that, for instance, even the Bill of Rights, let's just take the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, the things that people think of as their rights. All of those things, the Constitution is saying, God gave you those things, you have those things, and government's job is to protect those things. Well, that goes back to the Declaration, where they lay out in the Declaration what they call the laws of nature and nature's God. And they say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So they're basically saying from the beginning, our freedom is not given to each other. We don't just come up with this. God gave us this freedom. And now then they go on to say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what they're saying in the Declaration is God gave us freedom and rights, and then we create government. We design government for one purpose, to protect the rights that God gave us. That's different from any government in the history of the world up to that time. Every time before that, except for Israel, every time before that, government was created because God gave the power to government, and then government decided what the people got. So they really turned everything on its head. But if you skip the Declaration, you miss that, and it's hard to really understand how the Constitution works, in the design that they gave us.
Man, I love this. We're going to school right now, and we are learning from the Constitution coach, you guys, Rick Green. Listen, we've got the Bill of Rights. Now, you just kind of use the Bill of Rights and the Constitution sort of interchangeably. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Is that right? And so that's right. Where we get this idea of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. Now, Rick, did God give us the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to the right to bear arms? Or did the Constitution give us those freedoms?
Such an important question, man, especially with the debates today where people want to take away those rights based on what type of speech you have. So they want to label your speech hate speech or whatever other label they come up with,
right.
and then have government decide whether or not you get that right to speech. And so if the Constitution gave you the freedom of speech, then the Constitution can take it away, or if you will, the government can take it away. It's very important to understand what you just said, which is God gave us these freedoms, and then government, through the Constitution, guarantees to protect those freedoms. And that applies, Kirk, to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, our due process rights, the ability to make sure that we're innocent until proven guilty, and that we have the right to confront accusers and call witnesses. I mean, all of those things in the Bill of Rights, these are innate rights that God gave to us. And our founding fathers said, government, your job is to protect those things. You're not the source of those things. You're the protector of those things.
Now, let me just push back a little bit and ask a question. Wait a minute. What's the verse that says that you can carry a pistol? What's the verse that says that you can say things against the government? I don't know a verse. What book is that in? Is that in the book of Second Constitutions? I don't know where that is.
It's actually all over Exodus and Deuteronomy and the law that God gave us, the ability to defend your home, the ability to make sure that you can protect against those things, and that we would hold people accountable. And that if you did take someone's life because they broke into your home, robbing your home in the middle of the night, that you were innocent in that, and that you had the right to do that in order to defend your family. Or even when you think about Elijah saying, hey, you other prophets, you can absolutely say whatever you think is the right thing and call down these supposed gods that you have, and then we'll see who's actually right in those things. So there's a lot of examples throughout both the Old and the New Testament of these concepts of freedom and liberty, but it was never codified in the way that our founding fathers did until America was created. And I do want to add to what you said about the Bill of Rights, just so people understand the context there. The Constitution itself was given to us in 1787, ratified, and the new government created in 1789. And the first thing they did was add those 10 amendments, because people back home were saying, all right, listen, we'll go for this new federal government, but only if you make sure that federal government is limited and can't trample on these individual rights. So we want these individual rights put into the Constitution, and that's why those 10 amendments were put in immediately in 1789.
And that's such a great idea that they did that, because we're seeing today the federal government, and I'm not a political guy, I'm not a constitutional expert like you are, but it seems to me that the federal government is not staying small and limited like you say the government is supposed to do to protect our rights, but they're actually moving out of that lane to seemingly take over some of our rights on how to educate our children, or health care, or whether or not we can have guns or what kinds of guns. How is that possible when you have the Constitution, which limits the government, and you have the Bill of Rights, which specifically protects people's rights? How is it that the federal government can continue to just walk over the top of those things?
Well, let me first say generally, Kirk, that government is a blessing. It's a God-created institution, and it's a blessing when it stays in its lane. When it gets outside its lane, it becomes a curse, because then it becomes abusive. Then it begins to take away those rights. And our founders were smart enough to say, man, we're going to spread this thing out at the federal level. We're going to spread it amongst these three branches of government. And then we're going to spread it between the federal, the state, and the local. And then even at each of those levels, we're going to spread it out even more, because we don't want any one group or one person to have too much power. The reason they're able to do what they're doing now, Kirk, is real simple. We don't live under the Constitution right now in America. We live under the Courtstitution. We have allowed the court to redefine the Constitution and amend the Constitution for 50 years in a way that the founders never envisioned that it would be done. And we haven't done it ourselves. If we, the people, wanted to grow the federal government and have all these new programs and new agencies, we could do that. We could amend the Constitution to add power to the federal government. But instead, we didn't do that, but the court did. And there's nothing in the Constitution that gave the court the power to expand the federal government to micromanage all these things that you're talking about. And I think that's one reason, man, so many people are concerned about this leaked opinion from Samuel Alito, because it's not just a pro-life opinion that overturns Roe v. Wade. Sam Alito says in that opinion, the court has been out of its lane. The federal government has been out of its lane. And he actually starts to restore constitutional limitations on the federal government. That's a big, big deal, and it will reverse 50 years of leftism being able to inculcate the American people through the courts, not through the elected representatives of the people.
Rick, some people might be saying, I'm not a Constitution expert. I can't even remember hearing any friend of mine said that they've read the Constitution. I don't know, that sounds kind of weird. I'm going to leave that up to the politicians. But you're saying, no, we need to understand the Constitution. We need to understand what America is built on, or all of our freedoms and blessings will be taken away. How can people realistically become students of the Constitution, and how will that help them?
Yeah, you know, Kirk, if we're going to wave that flag behind me, and I got the Texas flag, of course, as well, but if we're going to wave our flag, we got to understand why that flag is worthy of being waved. We got to understand what it really stands for, what the American system is. And I don't know how to say this in a nice way, brother, but listen, if you're a citizen of the United States, you don't just have the rights that we talk about, you have a responsibility. This is a duty. Our nation needs us to be good citizens, and we can only be good citizens if we study citizenship, if we study what it means to be an American. There was a founding father by the name of Benjamin Rush. He was actually a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he said patriotism was as important to the country as love of your family is to your family life. He said we actually have a moral and religious duty to be good patriots and to study how this thing works. It is a responsibility. And here's the good news. It doesn't have to be boring. I know for me, I hated this stuff in high school and college. I slept through those classes because they were just memorizing dates and names. I didn't care about it. It can be exciting and fun when you actually do history the way that God does history in the Bible. You do it through the stories of the people that lived it, and then you do it through your own eyes. You say, okay, what is my job as a citizen? Not just what is government's job. What is my job? That's what we do at Patriot Academy. We rekindle a love of country, a love of patriotism, a love of history, and we make studying the Constitution fun. We've got all kinds of great courses. We've even got this course with this crazy guy named Kirk Cameron called American Campfire Revival. That's a really fun one to do with your friends and family, not only around the fire, in the living room, wherever you can get people together. So I recommend falling in love with history, but don't do it alone. Actually get involved in a community group. There's something about that fellowship when you study these things and start applying them in your own life and in your own community.
Hi, I'm Kirk Cameron. Thanks for watching this clip from my interview with Rick Green. Please like and leave a comment on this video. If you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another episode.